Court, all rise, please.
All right, good morning, everybody.
Let's get started.
Hampshire County Superior Court is now in session. Please be seated.
Good morning. Now before the court is Hampshire County Civil Action 1780 CD 0033, Patrick Buchanan et al. Versus the Town of Greenfield et al. This matter is scheduled for a jury trial.
All right, I wish to address just a few matters before we bring the jurors in. They're all here?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great, thank you. First, I did not observe Lieutenant Dodge nodding his head or whatever have you. If I had, I would have called you on it, okay? My job is to see to it that this trial is conducted in a manner which is, among other things, orderly. No party, no lawyer is to be gesturing or nodding in acquiescence or in opposition to something that is being said. At the same time, if counsel observes any such behavior, it's not up to counsel to call the party on it. That is a usurpation of my role and sends the wrong message to the jury. I agree that that sort of behavior is not to be tolerated. Indeed, I cannot see Lieutenant Dodge because he was being blocked by Attorney McDonough, who is now seated where Attorney Ryan was seated yesterday. That's for me, okay? Bring it to my attention, okay? And I'll call the offending party on it. You know, I've been trying cases for 14 years now, hundreds of jury trials. That has happened, okay? But it's not for counsel, with all due respect, to call the witness on it. The other matter, you know, I, for one, am not afraid to reconsider myself, okay, or to reconsider my reconsiderations. And yesterday, after reflecting and rereading for the third time the defense motion for reconsideration, I did reconsider my ruling and have modified just part of it, okay? And you should have received this endorsement yesterday, okay? But from the looks in your face, I don't think that you did.
We did, Your Honor. I'm just not sure what we can and can't do.
Okay, that's why I'm addressing it now. Okay, what I reconsidered was the introduction of evidence of the Confederate flag for purposes of comparator evidence. Okay, I ruled that it was admissible in three regards. Okay, one, for what it's worth for impeachment purposes. Two, as an indication of some degree of bias under the circumstances that at least are identified in the brief, as well as under, bear with me a brief moment. Bulwer versus Mount Auburn Hospital, okay? The case law that is set forth therein. So it can come in for those purposes, but it cannot come in as comparator evidence for the reasons that are articulated in the defendant's brief. That is to say that the First Amendment issue is effectively I suppose, a governing authority as to whether or not the police department actually had any right to sanction Sergeant McCarthy, then Sergeant McCarthy at the time. Mindful that there's an argument that somehow the department itself undercut its supposed lack of authority by telling Sergeant McCarthy that he could not go on to social media with it. Just to give you the benefit of my thinking, initially, I'll be candid, I paused on this issue before I rendered my initial decision on the comparator piece, okay? But my sense was that that was something that can go to the jury to make a determination as to whether or not it is comparative evidence. That is to say that whether or not the department was within its authority to sanction or to investigate even Sergeant McCarthy was an issue that the jury could consider, and I've reconsidered that. So in response to your question, there will not be any evidence of the Confederate flag for purposes of comparator evidence. That is to say, that the jury is not to hear evidence that the police department failed to investigate or somehow sanction. Let me finish my sentence, please. Sergeant McCarthy, okay, and as such, it won't come in as comparative evidence. It may come in, however, for purposes of either impeachment or demonstrating some degree of bias, at least on behalf of Sergeant McCarthy, to the extent that he played a role in the department's actions in this case. And I do note that there are two defendants in this case. There's the city of Greenfield as well as Chief Haig. So those are my rulings, or that is my ruling relative to the motion to reconsider. Okay, I'm truly not entertaining further argument on the other bases. That is to say, the introduction of that evidence for the other purposes I've identified. But if you have clarification questions, I'm happy to entertain them. So, Attorney Ryan, in that regard.
Yes, Your Honor. Yesterday, my brother got to speak twice. We didn't get to speak once on the issue. On the issue of the towns, what they could or couldn't do, there is no evidence anywhere that they considered the issue. The MCAD complaint, Your Honor, wasn't filed until April of 2016. The events took place in December 2015. So for those 4 months, and by, let's face it, April 2016, the social media hubbub had died. If they were going to take action, they were going to take action. But there was nothing in the jurisdiction, there was nothing in any proceeding anywhere challenging the city. And certainly the city, it's our position, they had at least an obligation to raise the question, and there is no evidence that they ever raised the question. And my brother's just saying, we're blessed, you can't even raise the question. And our position is they should have at least raised the question, what is it, what can we do? And there will be zero evidence that in the time frame from December through at least April 2016 that the town did anything on the question.
You're only talking about the Confederate flag issue vis-a-vis Sergeant McCarthy.
Sergeant McCarthy, as well as the department.
Is that a yes or no?
It goes to the comparator of conduct unbecoming. Conduct unbecoming in their rules is defined as conduct which cast a negative light on the department.
I understand that. It's just your argument isn't quite clear. As I understand, you're simply offering your opposition to the motion to reconsider relative to the comparative evidence. As I've indicated, okay, I reconsidered my ruling. Under those circumstances, not only was there a First Amendment right for what it's worth, okay, for Sergeant McCarthy to be hanging a Confederate flag, but it falls outside the parameters of permissible comparator evidence. So if you're simply attempting to get me to reconsider my reconsideration, that's denied respectfully, okay?
Thank you, Your Honor.
So I think we're all clear. Yes.
May I just briefly, Your Honor, I understand I'll be brief, but just for the record as well.
When lawyers say they'll be brief, that's an indication to me that it'll be anything but. What is it?
On behalf of my client, we just believe that you had it right the first and second time, Your Honor. My client's matter was referred to the district attorney's office. Notably here, the DA, the defendants did nothing with respect to McCarthy and the flag, and they're saying that this is a legal defense and also refusing to produce the legal opinion or any emails or anything that they should produce under Falmouth Marine. So they want it both ways. You're getting no discovery on what we did under this, and we're just asserting that there was this contemporaneous legal decision, which we've never seen any factual predicate for. That's an exception of the attorney-client privilege. So they want it both ways, Your Honor. And so if they're asserting that defense, we should get to see the emails and the information that they withheld on this topic, or it just doesn't exist, in which case the whole idea falls apart. It's a after the fact argument for why they did nothing to counteract this flag issue. You should have at least investigated that.
All right, your objections are noted. I don't think I need to hear from you, with all due respect.
Your Honor,
in
I'm
rebuttal.
getting up
If there's
based
a
on their initial
clarification, I'll hear from you
invitation.
in that regard.
Because even though you told us they couldn't argue, that's what they just did.
I'm sorry, what?
Even though you told us don't argue it, that's all they did.
I understand,
I
counsel,
understand.
please.
So we're clear. So I'm getting up a clarification. You're relying on Bulwar that they can put in the evidence that this flag was in McCarthy's garage to show that McCarthy is a bigot, right?
I am not going to allow you to put words back into my ruling. So if that's your attempt, I'm not going to be engaged in that regard. What is your clarification?
Is the purpose of it going in, one of them, is to demonstrate racial bias on the part of McCarthy?
Yes.
Nobody else.
I'm not saying that. Okay?
Well, I'm trying to
It's
understand.
going to come in, all right? And whether or not under Bulwar it comes in as a demonstration of more systemic bias. And once again, there were two defendants in this case, all right? I'm not going to give anyone a toehold for appellate review on amplification of my written ruling. So I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to permit that degree of engagement. Anything else that is
I just
different?
want to be clear. So you're saying that this evidence can be used by the plaintiff to suggest racial animus on the part of somebody else besides McCarthy?
I'm going to step off the bench now. We're going to bring in the jury and we're going to get started. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All rise, please. Recess.
We're live.
I'm just warming it up because it takes whatever happened
Yeah.
yesterday to go out and I'll power it off.
We can, okay, you just warmed up, okay.
So now we did yesterday.
It
Yeah.
did, yeah, and eventually.
Yep, it
I'll
comes
just shut
up.
it back down just so we.
No, leave it on, because we're gonna start in
Well, I don't
relatively.
want- Okay, I just don't want
quickly.
to see. Are you doing? Are we done?
Yeah.
So we'll have that.
There you
Are there other things open that you don't want them to see?
The brain
No,
trust.
no,
The brain trust. Brody and Stefano, we're on.
the redacted. The redacted.
So,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Constant fear.
Hmm?
Constant fear.
No, this is supposed to be a good appeals card. I'll be seen.
Jury entry.
We'll see what happens. Apparently you can, apparently you must have, as you can, that's good.
Court, all rise, please.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning, Your Honor.
Great, thank you for your patience. I do greatly appreciate it. Please have a seat. Right, ladies and gentlemen, has anything come to your attention since I last saw you here in court which has affected your abilities to remain fair, to remain impartial? Hearing no affirmative responses, Mr. Buchanan, you remain under oath. Please retake the stand. Attorney Ryan, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
We were reviewing some background information about you yesterday. You received a degree, an undergraduate degree from the University of Massachusetts, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Do you have any further education?
Yes, I do.
And could you explain?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice from Western New England University.
Sir, can you please speak more loudly and into the microphone? Thank you.
I have a master's degree in criminal justice from from Western New England University.
And when did you obtain the master's degree?
2003, 2004.
When you started with the department, it was civil service, correct?
That's correct.
And at some point, did that designation change, sir, to the best of your understanding?
It did.
Okay. In the civil service system, as you recall it, what is it?
I'm not sure that I could describe it in. Basically, civil service handled the hiring of municipal employees. It was. My understanding is that it was.
The objection is sustained. You'll need to lay a foundation.
Okay. At some point, the town went out of civil service, or the police department went out of civil service?
That's correct.
And what's your understanding as to, what's your best recollection as to when that occurred?
Around 2015?
Prior to 2015, had you taken civil service promotional exams?
I had.
Okay. And do you recall approximately how many you took?
Prior to 2015, 4, maybe 5.
And did you take a promotional exam in 2014?
Yes, I did. I was just trying to play that back in my head.
And a promotional exam for what, sir?
For the position of police sergeant.
And explain what the exam consists of to the best of your knowledge.
It's a lot of material that you have to prepare for. There's information on supervision of police personnel. There's information on mass general law. There's information on what's referred to as criminal procedure. There's information on crime scene investigations. There's information on basically how to manage employees.
And what's your memory as to where you scored in the 2014 promotional exam?
I was the top scorer.
And what's your memory as to how many officers within the department took the promotional exam in 2014?
I believe there were 7 that took the exam.
And who passed?
Myself and Sergeant Haskins.
Okay. At the time, he was not Sergeant.
No, at that time he was Patrolman Haskins. Yes, sir.
Were you ever promoted based upon that exam result?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Promoted to what?
Provisional sergeant.
Okay. And you were promoted provisional sergeant when?
About the middle of January.
And do you have an understanding that your role or your placement on the civil service test had something to do with your promotion?
Yes.
And what's that understanding?
There were vacant supervisor positions that were in need to be filled. My understanding is that per per civil service rules, not enough of our department had passed the test for them to certify the list. So until the town either making a decision to hire just the folks that passed or to retest, that the position that would be filled would be a provisional one.
Did you hear Attorney Keston speak yesterday in his opening about a short list for civil service?
I did.
Okay. And what's your understanding of a short list?
A short list is one that doesn't suffice the 2 times plus 1 formula. Maybe I should back up and explain that. For the list to be certified through civil service, you have to have 2 times the amount of available vacancies plus 1 to fulfill a certified list. So in this particular case, they had 2 positions. The Greenville Police Department had 2 positions. So it would require 2 times 4 plus 1, 5 candidates to have passed the test for them to be for the test to be certified. Now, outside of that, the department can simply go with a short list and promote the people, if they so choose, that have passed.
Do they need approval from civil service to use a short list as you know, as to the best of your
I don't know. I don't know that.
If we could go to Exhibit 1.
Counsel, sidebar. You can wear masks if you want. You don't have to. No, that was just for the jurors.
Oh, I see.
Okay, exhibits. You've never identified any agreed upon exhibits, at least to me. So what is it that you're doing?
Your Honor, we have 30 to 40 agreed upon exhibits right now.
Can I see them? Are they in a binder?
You have the binder, correct?
Okay. Yes.
We're the ones who made the binders, Your Honor. We're still working on redacting. I think that we made a binder for you.
Right. Well, if there's an exhibit that you're seeking to introduce into evidence, okay, then we at least need to mark it. Have they been pre-marked?
So we talked to the clerk yesterday after the session closed, and she was suggesting that we would mark the binder as 1, and then...
That is what generally we would do.
Yeah.
But as I understand, the binder is not ready for prime time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So until then, we need to address the issue. Can you take, all right, how long will it take you to make redactions? Let me just ask you this. Oftentimes redactions are made before it goes to the jury. So you can, if you've got an agreement that a binder be introduced into evidence, subject to your further redaction, that's fine.
So, Your Honor, I think we can do that. We can give you one. It's $20 in the car. You can lug it. So I think we have enough here. At least we can give you a binder which is not redacted, but which has all these.
Is that the binder, that rather large? Okay.
Yes.
I presume there isn't one for each drawer, which is fine, since it looks like it's probably several thousand pages. But what we can do is have exhibit number 1, which is the binder, enter it into evidence. And do you have your own pre-marked exhibit tabs in there already?
Yes.
Because if you do, those will not be exhibits, since the entire binder is exhibit number 1, but rather those will be tabs, so
Tab
that and I'll explain that to the jury so that they have some clarification. Though, even though it says exhibit 17 in there, it really means tab 17.
Yep.
And that will be fine, and then you can make your redactions before it goes to the jury. How does that sound?
Yes.
And would you like one of the binders so you can
Absolutely,
see what
yeah.
it is?
I absolutely need one for myself so I can go through it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we'll get you, I think there's 2 binders. We'll get you the exhibits, the binder that you'll have, subject to us fixing them all.
That's fine. And, subject to reduction. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, I thought we just redacted one for the jury, and we don't have an issue with the judge.
Well, there's going to be one exhibit, okay, which will be the one that goes to the jury. If you wish that, that one needs to be redacted, okay? If you like, let me ask, how many do you have?
That's 6, right?
How many exhibits?
Yeah, binders. Yeah, exhibit binders.
Total binders? 6. We had 6 one for each of them.
Okay, this is
one,
what we're going to
one
do.
for us, one for you, one for the jury. So we made 6.
All right, so to be clear, we're going to have one of those binders entered into evidence as exhibit number 1, okay? That will be given to Assistant Clerk Duran. That will be the one which is redacted. I don't care if mine's redacted, okay? In fact, I'm going to give it back to you because it's not an exhibit, it's just a courtesy copy. You can have a place for it, okay? At the culmination of the trial, okay? So that's how we'll proceed. I'll explain to the jury that there's a stipulation as to exhibit number 1 and explain to them what it is, okay?
And we can put in the binder later when my brother brings up the rest of them.
Pardon me?
The binder we have here is our only binder, and you only have one. So we'll actually introduce it later.
What we will do is we will send you a test out to get other boxes. We have more. I think we have more. Right now, what's important that you have one, so you know what.
Yeah, that's fine.
And it's not important the jury has one because
They're not going to look at it right now.
So,
Yeah.
But we are going to show the exhibits. These are ones that don't require redaction, or they are redacted.
Okay, so this is what we'll do.
on the screen.
The one that you're going to show on the screen is going to be the exhibit. Okay, so
Exactly.
Ms. Duran doesn't need to. Ms. Duran does not need to be holding on to that. Okay,
Right.
so let's take one, mark it as exhibit number 1. There'll be a tab on the outside. You'll utilize that one for purposes of the overhead projection. You'll give me an unredacted version. That is not the exhibit. We'll move forward. Okay. Yes.
I don't want to be difficult, Your Honor.
All evidence of
It's too late for all that for all of you. I'll say that. Anyway.
But it's on the laptop, and we're using a laptop. Attorney Kessler's going to use a laptop. We're not using the overhead, so it's stuff that we've exchanged.
It's on your laptop.
Yeah.
It's not a paper. Okay, that's fine. If there's any objection, just let me know. But that's fine. Okay.
Just so you're aware, we've made the redactions. We just have to sub in the tags.
That's fine.
So we can do that later too.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, so let's get the judge
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, in this case, the lawyers have agreed in large measure, I think it's fair to say, to the introduction of exhibits for your consideration. As in many cases, as in this case, those exhibits are going to be in a binder, much like that, the binder that you see, this binder right here, okay? Thank you very much, Attorney Kessler, okay? Only one of these is the official exhibit, okay, which you'll have with you during the course of your deliberations. The entirety of this binder is exhibit number 1. You'll see when you get it, I'm not going to hold it up because I'll break a wrist. You'll see inside there are neat tabs, okay? And then on each document behind the tab, it says, for example, Plaintiff's Exhibit number 10. You can ignore those exhibit tabs, okay? But it's fair to say for reference purposes, when the lawyers refer to tab 35, it means tab 35 in here. So while you're taking your notes, okay, if you're looking at a document, I'll ask counsel to be careful to identify what tab they're talking about. Lastly, the lawyers will have an overhead projection which will show on that screen. And so I'm going to want to make sure that you can all see it. And Officer DeRoche, maybe move it a little bit closer toward the jury. It's tilted a little bit this way. I want to make sure that the jury can see, just so it's flush, so to speak. So they're going to show the exhibits. from their laptop. They're identical to what is in. Maybe a little bit this good. No, I can't say it. Just so that it's pretty much beautiful. That's great. Thank you. Okay. Can all the members of the jury see what's on the screen? Metza. Not really. Okay. Let's turn it back toward them. Okay. All right. Can you all see it now? You know what? If you can't see it because you're too far away, is that the issue? Okay. If you want to move closer, but why don't we do this? Are the jurors comfortable sitting next to each other so you're not one seat apart? Is anyone uncomfortable doing that? Okay. Why don't you all move over one seat, and that should bring you closer. We like to keep you in the order in which you are seated. Okay. Can everyone see it now? If you can see it, if you could just acknowledge, just nod your head, please. Great. So they can all see it. Perfect. All right. Yes?
Yeah, present one for the witness as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so by agreement then, the binder which is being shown to Mr. Buchanan will be marked as exhibit number 1. Okay? Okay, let's proceed. Thank you all for your patience while we work that out. And once again, counsel, throughout the trial, please just let me know what tab you're looking at so I can find it on mine as well. Thank you.
Mr. Buchanan, looking at tab 1, can you identify this document?
It is the employment action promoting me to provisional sergeant, dated January 14th, 2015.
Okay. And in this, it has it indicates the different rates, correct?
The different, I'm sorry?
Pay rates?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so at a patrolman wage, you were earning what per week?
985.10 $985.10 a week.
Okay. And as a sergeant, you were going to earn what per week?
$1,146.19.
And if we turn to Exhibit 2, or tab 2, excuse me, do you see that?
I see that.
And what is that, sir? Actually, back up. If I could turn your attention to tab 18.
Tab 18.
Tab 18.
Can you tell me what it is?
Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And the first several pages, the first 8 to 12 pages, are the internal affairs rules.
That's correct.
Okay. And do you understand that these are the rules for the department?
I do. That's correct.
Could you read aloud general considerations? What's under there?
A relationship of trust between the employees of this police department and the citizens of the community is essential. As such, all police employees are expected to conduct themselves in such a manner as to reflect favorably upon themselves and the department. To a large degree, the public image of this department is determined by how well it responds to allegations of misconduct against the department or its officers. To that end, the objectives of an internal affairs investigation are protection of the public, protection of the employee, protection of the department, removal of unfit personnel, and correction of procedural training problems. Alleged or suspected violations of laws, ordinances, bylaws, department rules, regulations, policies, procedures, and other, verbal or written, must be investigated according to the procedures outlined for each.
Okay, if we turn to the next section on page 2 deals with procedures for complaints, correct?
That's correct.
And beyond that, receiving and recording complaints, correct?
That's correct.
On page 5, it deals with immediate actions.
Yes, sir. That's
Okay.
correct.
And under the first bullet point, what does it say?
In some cases, the resolution of a complaint may be accomplished by the shift supervisor if the incident is clearly not of a serious nature, or arises from a misunderstanding or lack of knowledge of the law or the limitation of a police officer's authority.
And then under section 3, notification to the chief, what does that state?
If the substance of the complaint against the agency or its employees, if proven, would be of grave nature, or is an accusation of a serious crime, the chief shall be notified forthwith.
Page 6 sets forth the procedure for investigation of complaints.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there's category A complaints and category B complaints under 2.
Yes, sir.
And what are category A complaints?
Criteria for the assignment of an investigation to a shift supervisor or officer in charge of the station may include, but are not limited to, A, allegations of rudeness, B, tardiness, and C, minor cases of insubordination.
And then under 2, or under B in that category, complaints subject to an internal investigation, internal affairs investigations.
The criteria for determining the categories of complaints to be investigated by the internal affairs include, but are not limited to, allegations of corruption, brutality, use of excessive force, violation of civil rights, criminal misconduct, and any other matter as directed by the chief.
You've been subject to 2 internal investigations, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in any of the charges against you, did they ever accuse you of corruption?
No.
Any accusation of brutality?
No.
Any accusation of use of excessive force?
No.
Any accusation of violation of a person's civil rights?
No.
Any accusation of criminal misconduct?
No.
If we can go to page 8.
Yes, sir.
This has to do with investigations regarding criminal wrongdoing.
That's correct.
Subpart B. What's that say?
Prior to being questioned regarding alleged personal involvement in criminal activity, a department employee shall be given the Miranda warnings, including the right to have an attorney present during any such questioning prior to custodial interrogation.
And then sub C.
After Miranda warnings have been given, any voluntary statement made thereafter could be admissible in a criminal proceeding, and it may otherwise be used for departmental disciplinary purposes.
If we turn to page 10. deals with investigative techniques.
Yes.
And subpart B, could you read that aloud?
Medical or laboratory examinations. Upon orders of the chief of police or his or her designee, an employee may be required to submit to a medical or laboratory examination at the department's expense. This examination must be specifically directed at narrowly related to a particular internal affairs investigation being conducted by the department.
The next section.
Drug or alcohol testing. Police employees may be compelled to submit to alcohol testing in connection with an administrative investigation based upon reasonable suspicion.
Were you ever asked to submit to alcohol or drug testing?
No, sir.
In December 2014, there was a traffic stop involving the Timothy Cooley, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And could you explain what happened in this traffic stop?
At about 10:30 at night, I was a field training officer for Rachel Capella. She was a trainee. And while coming off the rotary in Greenfield by Applebee's, I observed a motor vehicle fail to stop for the stop sign at the intersection of Mohawk Trail and Minor Street. I think it's Minor Street. Yeah. The vehicle just ran through the light. My trainee sitting next to me, we both saw it, so we stopped the vehicle. Inside the vehicle were some young folks. The driver was identified as Mr. Tim Cooley, who was a junior operator at the time. When I asked Mr. Cooley for his license, he didn't have it on his person. I then checked the inspection status on the vehicle, and the vehicle was also not properly inspected pursuant to mass laws. So I was able to get his registration, went back to the cruiser, and started processing what I was going to do in this particular situation. I decided, after confirming his license status, confirmed him as a junior operator, also understanding that a citation, if as a junior operator, could lead to suspension and very heavy fines. I opted to write a warning for the stop sign violation, and upon returning to the car with the warning, I had a short conversation with the driver. I asked him, which parent he lived with, and he said he lived with his mother. I said, well, I'm going to write you a warning for this infraction. The stop sign violation carries a $100 to $150 fine. No license in possession is $35. The failure to inspect, another $50. I'm going to suggest that you take some of the money you would have spent on the citation and do something nice for your mom. We were right around the corner from Christmas. I think the stop was around the 18th of December. And I said, how does that sound to you? He says, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I said, however, make sure you get that inspection sticker taken care of. And what I said and what Attorney Keston mentioned in his opening remarks was, it's not like you don't live in Greenfield and I can just come by your house to see if you're using your car. because that's one of the elements that's involved in actually charging someone with. Because if he took this car back to his house and just parked it there, but I wanted him to encourage him to do the right thing, and that was the order that I gave him. Wrote the citation. He drove off. I realized that I had actually forgotten to give him back his registration, so I ended up having to stop him a little bit further down the road. Say, "I'm sorry. You're not in trouble. Here's your registration. Take care." And literally, that was the last time that I thought about that stop until I came back from vacation. I took 2 weeks off around Christmas, and I had just learned that I had done well on the civil service exam for promotion, and in checking my they call them pigeonholes, our mailboxes, there was a note from this young man, and I believe this might have been my first day in the sergeant's uniform. So I'm going through my mailbox, and Sergeant Dodge was there, and there's this letter from him. Now, this almost never happens, where you get a response from a young person that you've given a break to. But he wrote me this note, and he listed all the things that he did for his mom. He got her a gift certificate to a Michael's because she likes to do crafting stuff. Got her a gift certificate for coffee, and he included in that a $10 gift card to Stop and Shop. And I remember turning to Sergeant Dodge and says, "What do I do with this?" He says, "I just send it back to him." And I literally put it into my duty bag and forgot about it. It was a $10 gift card. I wasn't going to spend it. As you can see, I probably make enough money that I don't need a $10, a gift card. So I put it into my duty bag, and it wasn't until 2 days later on my days off that I was called by the department and said that I was being investigated for that matter.
Turning your attention to tab 2. Do you see that?
Hold on. All right. Yes.
And that's an undated letter, correct?
That's correct.
And it's from whom to who?
It's from Sergeant Dan McCarthy to Lieutenant Joseph Birch.
And did Sergeant McCarthy ever talk to you about this?
No.
Did he ever ask for your input or your understanding of what happened here?
No.
And the letter indicates in the first line that McCarthy was advised by an officer speaking with Brenda Petullo that she wanted to share a positive experience that she had pertaining to Officer Buchanan, correct?
That's correct.
And so this is identified by Sergeant McCarthy as a positive experience.
It is.
Okay. And then later on in the letter, he finds some issue with it.
Yes.
And how long had you worked with Sergeant McCarthy as of January 2015?
Approximately 16 years.
If we could turn to tab 3. Do you record? Oh, yep. Do you recognize this document, sir?
I do.
And the date of it is what?
1/20/2015.
And there's charges or there's allegations in here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Conduct unbecoming R-R.402. What's that?
I'm not sure what the designation refers to, sir.
Are there rules of conduct within the department?
Yes.
Okay. And would Rule 402 be a conduct rule?
It very well could be.
I'm sorry, what page are you on of tab 3, please?
Your Honor, the front page?
Okay. And where exactly are you reading?
It'd be the second box, Your Honor. Well,
Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay, very good. Thanks. The first box. Okay.
and it indicates that there's Dan McCarthy's name at the bottom of page 1 there,
That's correct.
and he's identified as what?
The complainant.
And is it your understanding that this is the narrative of the investigation performed by Lieutenant Burge?
That is correct.
No, back to page 1. The person whose ID is blacked out on the page in front of in the top box is the actual driver, correct?
Okay, yeah, because it's not blacked out here, yes.
Yeah. And then the next person down listed as a witness is Rachel M. Capella, correct?
That's correct.
And who is she?
She was a trainee that I mentioned before.
Okay. If we turn to page 2, there's additional parties identified, or persons identified, correct?
That's correct.
Who is Todd J. Clark?
He's a detective with the Greenfield Police Department.
Okay. And he's identified in here as a reporting party?
That's correct.
And Megan Gilbert, who is she?
She then was a patrol officer for the Greenfield Police Department, now sergeant.
Brenda Petrulo, who is she?
I believe that is Timothy Cooley's mother.
Okay. Todd Dodge, is Mr. Dodge here?
That's correct.
Do you know the next individuals? Jeremy McClenthian, Ben Padua, or Brooke Gunsalls?
I don't.
Okay. If we turn to tab 4. This was delivered to you?
I don't remember the method by which it was conveyed. I do know that initially it was read to me over the phone, and then I couldn't testify as to how it was delivered thereafter.
And so this was notice of charges and allegations?
That's correct.
Okay. And if we turn to tab 5, this document is what?
It looks like a to for Lieutenant Burge from Detective Todd Clark.
Are you on exhibit or tab 5?
I'm sorry. Tab 6. All right. Yeah.
What does tab 5 say?
Tab 5. Notice of administrative leave.
Addressed to you,
That's correct.
per order of the chief,
Per order of the chief.
dated when?
1/21/2015.
Could you read aloud that first paragraph?
This department has initiated an internal investigation into allegations concerning your performance of your duties and your fitness to perform your duties. As your precise involvement in the incident under investigation is still unclear, I'm taking the following actions concerning your status.
And the rest of the letter essentially places you on paid administrative leave, correct?
That's correct.
And were you allowed to contact people within the department?
No.
What were the rules as you understood?
Basically, I could not function as a police officer in the community. I could not come to the station unless I was escorted into the station. I was basically, stripped of all my authority and rights as a police officer in the city of Greenfield, and pretty much basically forced to stay at home and wait for the next thing to happen.
If we could go back to tab 3, the investigative report. If you go to page 4 of it, which is the beginning of the narrative report,
Yes.
and in paragraph 3, Lieutenant Burge is documenting his conversations with Sergeant McCarthy, who had dropped a letter or left a letter under his door, correct?
Yes. That's correct.
McCarthy explained to Burge that he did not speak with the mother, correct?
Correct.
In paragraph 4, it's his summary of his, being Lieutenant Burge's summary of his conversations with Detective Clark, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And Clark relays his conversation with the woman who was in the department on an unrelated event, correct?
That's correct.
At the bottom line, it reads, I asked Detective Clark if he knew of any other incidents of this nature, correct?
That's correct.
And he did not know of any?
That apparently was his response, yes.
And with respect to Officer Gilbert, did she identify anything that you had done in her statement, which is at the bottom of that page?
She indicates that she felt it was strange, but that Officer Buchanan was always trying to think outside the box. And she said that she had, and it's cut off here on my copy, I don't know, but I believe it says no personal knowledge of any other motor vehicle stops where Officer Buchanan had done anything like this.
If we go to the bottom of the next page, they interview Officer Corey Green.
That's correct.
And it indicates Corey Green had worked with you during the majority of November, December.
That's correct. He was my
And
trainee.
the last line of that paragraph reads what?
Officer Corey Green did not observe Officer Buchanan make any deals with any motorists.
The document indicates that Lieutenant Burge called Brenda Patullo on the phone?
In the previous paragraph, sir?
Yes.
Yes,
And wanted to discuss further with him the motor vehicle stop, correct?
that's correct.
I object to the floor.
Sustained as to the form of the question, the answer may stand though, but please be mindful we're on direct examination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If we go to the next page, the middle paragraph indicates that Lieutenant Burge met with the operator, correct?
Correct.
If we go to the middle of that paragraph, where it says Officer Buchanan then told him to get his mother, could you read that aloud?
Officer Buchanan then told him to get his mother some flowers or buy her $50 of good stuff and give it to her and bring him the receipts to the station in an envelope within 7 days.
Okay. So it's good stuff or flowers, correct?
That's what he wrote, yes.
And at any time, did you intend to go after this young man if he didn't bring in receipts?
No, absolutely not.
If we go down the next one, this is Jeremy McClendith,
Okay,
correct?
that's correct.
And it indicates that Jeremiah was seated in the front seat.
Yes,
And if you read the last sentence at the bottom of the paragraph going over to the next page.
that Officer Buchanan then told Timothy that he needed to get flowers or $50 worth of stuff for his mom and bring him the receipt in an envelope and drop it off at the police station, or he would fine him and give him the citation.
If we turn to tab 6,
Tab 6.
do you see that?
I do.
Okay, that's Detective Clark's statement dated 1/15/2015.
That's correct.
And it appears that he was speaking with Miss Patullo.
That's correct.
And she was in there on other business.
That's correct.
And she asked to see you to speak with you about her son, correct?
That's correct.
And his last line in paragraph 1, she did not seem upset in any way, just wanted to tell me the story.
That's correct.
And then if you could read the third paragraph in this letter.
Brenda stated that over the next few days, her son brought her flowers and a few gifts and brought the receipts to Officer Buchanan. Brenda stated that she wanted to thank Officer Buchanan for this way of dealing with her son.
Did Officer Clark, Detective Clark, ever talk to you about this incident, sir?
He did not.
If we could turn to tab 8, sir.
Tab 8.
Tab 8. And this is a 4-page document?
I have 6 pages here.
It starts with a letter to you from Lieutenant Birch.
That's correct.
And what is this letter?
It's basically the letter notifying me that I'm subject to the internal affairs investigation.
You're being summoned into the police station?
That's correct.
And paragraph 2, what does that indicate is going to happen on the Thursday, January 27th?
As your precise knowledge, that paragraph, sir?
Yes.
It says once you appear, you must answer questions narrowly and specifically designed to fully explain your actions, responses and knowledge of the subject matter under investigation. You may invoke any of your constitutionally granted rights against self-incrimination when asked specific questions in regard to your involvement in any specific criminal activity, but must answer all questions that are narrowly and specifically defined regarding the performance of your duties and professional responsibilities that do not involve criminal activity.
And so this was a compulsory interview.
Correct.
And did you go to the interview?
I did.
And did you go with anyone?
I did.
And who did you go with?
I went with Sergeant Todd Todd Dodge, I'm sorry.
And how long did the interview take?
I don't recall, but it was lengthy.
Okay. And lengthy, is that 20 minutes? Is it an hour?
I feel like it was closer to an hour.
Okay. And what transpired in that interview?
I was interviewed about the circumstances surrounding the motor vehicle stop, and asked questions about it.
And did Sergeant Dodge say anything in connection that you recall?
Truthfully, I don't remember the details of that incident, that interview. It was 7 years ago, so I don't recall.
If we turn to tab 9. And this is a letter dated January 30, 2015?
That's correct.
From Chief Haig to you?
That's correct.
And he's found violations of rules and regulations?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's 3 defined rules and regulations violations?
That's correct.
Abuse of position? Rule 4.15?
That's correct.
Gifts and gratuities, Rule 4.17?
That's correct.
Conduct unbecoming, Rule .402?
That's correct.
Read aloud the second paragraph.
The one that begins, as you are aware.
No, each.
Okay. Each of the foregoing rule violations is serious and warrants significant discipline. I have decided, following a review of the results of the investigation to this incident and subsequent recommendations, to impose the following discipline upon you.
And the discipline that was imposed on you was what?
You will receive field counseling from the field training coordinator.
No, just
I'm sorry?
What happened to you with respect to the field training position?
I was removed from my abilities to do field training.
Were you required to take a course?
I was required to have my future performance reviewed and by the supervisor of the field training officers.
And who was that? Who was that individual?
At the time, it was Sergeant Todd Dodge, rather. Todd Dodge, sorry.
And there was a conflict of interest training?
Yes.
And what did that program consist of?
It was an online state ethics program that's basically the same program we all have to take every single year. You go online, you sign on, you watch some videos, they give you some examples of ethics violations. There's a test at the end, you take the test, you pass the test, and that's the training.
And then you were suspended?
I was.
For how long?
For 3 days.
Okay. And what happened to your status as a provisional sergeant?
I was removed from that position and returned to patrol.
Could you read aloud the third paragraph on page 2?
The City of Greenfield demands and deserves the highest levels of credibility and trust from its police department. Furthermore, we owe it to our officers and to those future officers to be trained in a manner which will be fair and impartial based upon that authority we have been granted.
In the first sentence of the next paragraph.
You place the Greenfield Police Department in a negative light by overstepping your authority to create punishments which were not part of your discretionary powers.
Other than the people within the investigation, did anyone else know about this incident?
Objection.
Overruled.
Other than the folks that were listed
As witnesses?
prior to all of this, no.
Was there any press associated with any of this?
No, there was no press that I'm aware of, at least.
Were there any comments in the media about any of this?
No, there were not.
Could you read aloud the middle two sentences beginning with "by your own admission"?
By your own admission, this tactic of, in your words, paying it forward has been utilized on several occasions. This is not part of a police officer's training, nor is it part of your discretionary powers under the law.
And the next sentence?
While I respect the ability for you to use your lawful discretion, creating a personal and arbitrary alternative, punitive option is not one of them.
And at any time in your interactions with this young man, did you intend to act in a punitive fashion?
Not at all.
In the young man's status who was subject to this stop, what does he do now?
He's a police officer with the Greenfield Police Department.
And how long has he been a police officer?
I'd say a couple years now.
So today's 2022.
I think I'm not sure of his hire date, but I believe.
Before COVID or after COVID?
Before COVID. Yes, before COVID.
So within a couple of years of this.
Correct.
And in your discussion with him, you had no idea that he wanted to be a police officer, correct?
Your Honor, form. It's his witness.
Sustain this to the form of the question. Please reform your question.
Was there any discussion with Mr. Cooley when you stopped him about a desire on his part to be a police officer?
No, there was not.
Tab 10, what is that?
That is the employment action form returning me to patrol.
Tab 11 is 2 pages, correct?
That's correct.
And it looks to be, well, they're two separate letters, correct?
That's correct.
And as of January 30, on your demotion, were you still a member of the supervisors union?
At that time, yes.
Okay. On and after January 30?
No.
Okay. And so at the time that this was sent, you had already been demoted, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And this appeal was in response to the demotion, correct?
I'm sorry, which
Well,
appeal?
no. Let me withdraw the question. The letter to Chief Haig is for what purpose?
Sorry, which?
Which is the first, we're on tab 11?
Oh, tab 11, okay. It was the appeal to the chief for the sanctions that I'd received around that motor vehicle stop.
In the last line, could you read that aloud?
This letter, that line?
Yep.
This letter should be considered notification of the appeal, which should satisfy the 48-hour reporting notification deadline.
And what's your understanding of the 48-hour reporting notification deadline?
That I have to, that I'm not able to answer that question. I'm not sure what that notification means.
And then if we look at the next letter, again, it's dated January 30 from Sergeant Todd Dodge to the mayor.
That's correct.
Read aloud the second paragraph in that letter from Sergeant Dodge.
Pursuant to MGL 31, Chapter 31, Section 41, within 48 hours after receipt of such notice, file a written request for a hearing before the appointing authority on the question of whether there was just cause for suspension. If such request is filed, he shall be given a hearing before the appointing authority or hearing officer designated by the appointing authority within 5 days after receipt by the appointing authority of such request.
And the appointing authority, to your understanding, is whom?
The mayor.
Okay. And at the time, the mayor was whom?
William Martin. Mayor William Martin.
Was there a hearing before Mayor Martin?
There was.
Okay. And where did the hearing take place?
My recollection was that it was at Town Hall.
Okay. And who attended, to the best of your memory?
Myself, Sergeant Dodge, and that's all that I can really remember.
Was there an attorney there on behalf of the union?
I believe there was, but again.
How long did the hearing last?
Not long to my recollection, but I don't have any concrete memories of that.
And if you turn to tab 12, this is the document entitled Fifth Step Grievance Hearing and Decision, correct?
That's correct.
And it's signed on page 2 by William Martin, Mayor?
That's correct.
Could you read aloud the decision part, the bottom of page 2 from the mayor?
I am disappointed that in light of these days of magnified oversight of law and law and enforcement, Officer Buchanan failed to see or understand the nature of overstepping and exceeding authority and the negative aspects these actions bring upon the city, the department, and the police officer. Because of the serious nature of these behaviors and actions, I am not certain that the proposed discipline is sufficient. However, in consideration of the chief's statement that he believes in Officer Buchanan's abilities, and moving forward can trust that this behavior will no longer occur, my decision is therefore to uphold the discipline as stated by the chief.
And did the chief speak to any negative aspects that these actions brought upon the city or the department?
Objection.
Sustained is the form of the question. You'll need to lay a foundation as well.
The chief in that paragraph you read spoke about the negative aspects of these actions bring upon the city, the department, and the
You
police.
mean the mayor?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you said the chief.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Please rephrase your question.
Mr. Buchanan, if you look at the mayor's statement in the bottom, he referenced negative aspects that these actions bring upon the city, the department, and the police officer, correct?
That's correct.
Did he, in the hearing, identify any such negative aspects that were he was aware of impacting the city or the police department?
No, he did not.
If we could turn to tab 13. What is this document, sir?
These are the findings of the arbitrator that arbitrated the demotion and the suspension for the motor vehicle stop.
And how did this get before an arbitrator, if you recall?
After the mayor made his decision, we applied for a decision through an arbitrator.
Could you read the second paragraph on page 1?
For the reasons set forth in the attached decision, there was not cause for a 3-day suspension. It must be rescinded and replaced with a written warning. Officer Buchanan should be made whole for the 3 days of lost pay. The decision to remove Officer Buchanan from provisional sergeant rank, and return him to the rank of patrol officer did not violate the agreement.
With respect to the hearing, do you recall who attended and who testified?
I testified, Sergeant Dodge testified on my behalf. Those were the main parties that I recall.
Okay. Did anyone testify on behalf of the city?
I suspect so, but at this point I don't remember who that might have been.
Now, turning to page 11 of this. This is the discussion by the arbitrator under the heading discussion.
Okay.
Is this the arbitrator's reasoning?
Correct.
Could you read aloud the second to the last paragraph?
Under where it says,
The second to the last sentence in the bottom paragraph.
starting at employees.
Yep.
An employee's past work record is an important factor to be considered when determining whether the punishment is appropriate and fair. Specifically, arbitrators often consider an employee's work record to ascertain where there exist other incidents that demonstrate the employee is unable to conform to the rules and regulations of the employer. Other instances of poor performance, or whether the instant incident is the last straw in a continuing pattern of inappropriate behavior.
Could you read the arbitrator's remarks, page 15, that last paragraph?
In the present case, Officer Buchanan's conduct was not malicious and was well intended. The results of the investigation show that, at worst, Officer Buchanan committed an error in judgment. There is no justification to remove the grievant from the workforce for even one day. A suspension with a loss of pay and the fact that this suspension becomes a permanent fixture in the employee's personnel record is too severe and inappropriate based upon a momentary lapse of judgment committed in this case. Officer Buchanan has never been disciplined in his 15-year tenure with the department. Accordingly, under the principles of just cause, the grievant should not be suspended for his conduct.
In the last sentence?
Based on all the factors, the suspension of the grievant should be reduced to a written warning.
Were you involved in, switching subjects, were you involved in a promotional process in 2015?
I was.
Okay. And what was that promotional process, sir?
It was what's referred to as an assessment center that allowed us to forego the more rigorous civil service exam.
And where was the assessment center held?
The assessment center was held at Greenfield Community College in Greenfield.
And this was for what position, sir?
For the position of police sergeant.
And how many promotions were going to be made in this assessment center?
2.
And do you recall how many officers were involved in the assessment center?
7.
Could you explain what the assessment center consists of?
The first day was a written exam.
Well, actually, let me back up. The assessment center is conducted by whom?
The assessment center was conducted by an outside agency that, I guess that's the answer, an outside agency. It wasn't hired by the police department in the town.
Thank you. If we can turn to tab 14. Do you recognize this document, sir?
I do.
And this is the list from the assessment center?
That's correct.
And this first page shows us what, sir?
It defines the eligibility list based upon the Civil Service Assessment Center for promotion.
Okay, but is the names listing, is that random or is that a ranking?
I believe that to be the ranking.
And the next pages behind it are what?
Their scores.
And so on the assessment center, sir, your final score was what?
88.
And the score is broken down by, can you explain what these items are?
The scores are broken down by a raw score for the actual assessment center, which included testing, followed by a day of scenarios that you were graded on. And the second was a employment and experience factor that was used to affect your score.
And then there's additional points for veteran status and 25 years service?
That's correct.
Okay, and that didn't apply to you?
It did not.
And your final score was what?
88.
Christopher Green is an officer with the department?
Yes, he is.
He's the next page?
Yes, he is.
And he had an 80?
Yes, he did.
Okay. The next page is Jason Haskins?
That's correct.
Okay. Jason Haskins' final score is what?
89.
Okay. And Jason Haskins had successfully passed the civil service exam, correct?
The previous civil service exam, that's correct.
Officer Kratz did not have a significant enough score. Was that a fair statement?
Yes, that would be correct in saying.
Okay. And then Officer Road, his score was what?
His score was an 89.
And let's look again at Jason Haskins. Under employment and experience score, what did he show?
1.2.
And what did Officer Road show for employment and experience?
5.2.
Okay. Had Mr. Haskins been serving in a provisional appointment?
He had, yes.
And when was he provisionally appointed?
Shortly after I was demoted.
And what spot did he take?
He took my spot.
And so he had been provisional from shortly after your demotion through the date of this assessment?
That's my understanding, yes.
How many days were you an active provisional sergeant?
If you include the dates that I was placed on leave, then I believe it's about 2 or 3 weeks. But actual days in the uniform, it was just a couple days.
In James Road, what was his position in the department in August 2015?
I believe he was a provisional sergeant at that point.
And how long, to the best of your memory, had he been a provisional sergeant?
I couldn't answer that, Attorney.
Was there a written exam given by Badge Quest?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the
Was
question?
there a written exam given by Badge Quest as part of the promotional process?
There was.
Okay. Did you ever obtain your score?
On the written exam?
Yes.
No.
And what's your understanding as to the explanation?
That they were not releasing the actual written scores. I do, however, remember the proctor for the assessment center on the next day. We took the written exam the first day, and the next day we came back for the scenarios, indicating that everyone had passed. But no scores were given.
If we turn to tab 15, what is this, sir?
It appears to be the overall rankings for promotions, basically the promotional list for the department after the assessment center.
And there's various scores here, correct?
Correct.
If we start from the right, under assessment center, there's a score there, correct?
That's correct.
And they grade Haskins and Road as tied for 1?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're third?
That's correct.
What's your understanding of what the service file review was?
My understanding was just, basically looking at officers.
Object. You'll need to lay a foundation. Objection sustained.
Do you have an understanding as to what the service file review was for this scoring processor?
Objection.
Sidebar.
Okay, what is the objection, please?
I have no idea where this is understanding from. No, he's got to lay a foundation as to where it gets.
All right. Well, I did indicate he needs to lay a foundation. You posed one question. I didn't get an answer, but you're going to need a foundation as to his understanding as to what that term means. I have no idea what it means itself.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask him if he knows.
Well, it's more than just that. Okay, he needs to lay a competent basis for what he understands it to be. So let's see where it goes. Okay. Thank you. You may repeat your question and lay a proper foundation.
Thank you, Your Honor. Service file review was one of the grades, correct?
That's correct.
Correct. Do you have an understanding as to what this grade was?
Why don't you rephrase your question? That question may have two different meanings.
Do you know what criteria they were reviewing with respect to the service file, sir? Do you recall?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you recall?
Personnel file.
Okay. And so this is a review of what personnel file?
The individual promotional candidates' personnel file.
Okay. And who was doing the service file review?
I'm uncertain.
But it's your understanding there was a personnel file review.
Correct.
And you were scored in what place?
5th.
And what is the oral interview, sir?
That's an interview in front of commissioners and police commissioners and other people that have been selected to interview the candidates.
And if we go to the following pages, it identifies some of these individuals, correct?
That's correct.
And if you look through the following pages, there's a Robert Hawkins, a
Yep.
Gary Longley, and a Donald F. White, correct?
That's correct.
All right. What's Mr. Hawkins' role? With respect to this?
He was one of the commissioners that was reviewing the candidates.
Okay. Does he have a role with the town?
Other than him being on the police commission, no.
Okay. So there's such a thing as the Public Safety Committee?
Yes, the public safety, yes.
Okay. And is he on that board?
I believe that all the folks that are listed here are.
Are on the board?
Yeah.
Okay. So it would appear that there were 3 members who participated?
Yes,
And Dennis Helms, he's the town's HR director, correct?
that's correct.
Do you know who Commissioner Clark, if we look under yours, which is page 2, do you know who Commissioner Clark was, sir?
Not offhand, no.
Okay. Do you know who Commissioner Provost was?
Not offhand.
And how long did the interviews take, sir?
Anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour.
And who was in the interviews?
All the commissioners, the candidate, and the chief.
And your overall score on column 1 shows you where?
Can you direct us to which page or back to?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, but back to page 1.
It says that I'm 5th.
No, on overall.
Overall score is 3rd.
And who's ahead of you?
Officer Rode and Officer Haskins.
And were appointments subsequently made?
Yes.
And who was appointed to the permanent positions?
Officer Haskins and Officer Rode were both promoted.
I'm going to start into something new.
Now's a good time then to take a break. Thank you very much for that heads up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our mid-morning break with the instruction not to discuss the case with anyone, including amongst yourselves, nor to do any investigation or research. Look at any media reports, should there be any. We'll take 20 minutes. I'll look forward to greeting you back here. Then we'll go to 1 o'clock. Thank you. All right, I'll see you all.
Sure, Andrew. Court, all rise, please.
All right, welcome back, everybody.
Hampshire County Superior Court is now back in session. Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, has anything come to your attention since I last saw you here in court which has affected your ability to remain fair, to remain impartial? Seeing no affirmative responses, so let's return now to Mr. Buchanan's direct examination.
Mr. Buchanan, if we go back to the IA, which is tab 3, it identified a complainant, correct?
One moment. It did, yes.
And the complainant was whom?
Daniel McCarthy.
If we go to tab 19.
Thank you.
What are the documents that are marked as Exhibit 19?
Is that a question to me, sir?
Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
Your Honor, not 19. What is that?
Oh. Your Honor,
It appears that what's behind tab
Should we be
19
heard
is.
sidebar, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. While we're doing that, Mr. Buchanan, if you can maybe move the microphone a little bit closer to your mouth, we're beginning to lose you a little bit here.
Sorry.
That's quite all right. So, what I have behind tab 19 is marked Exhibit 22. Is that part of the problem here, or is there something else? I'm sorry? Just be clear, what is tab 19 so that I know what we're looking at?
So under tab 19 that I have, Your Honor, it was the records relevant to the Confederate flag posting. So,
We contested that.
Hang on.
Okay, I don't have, let me,
Your Honor, I can clarify.
well, let me just be clear for the record. Tab 19, okay, that I've been given, is it the same as the tab 19 that Mr. Buchanan has?
Could I confirm that, Your Honor?
I can clarify what the issue is. I can save everybody time to look. What we did, we had contested exhibits and uncontested exhibits.
Right.
So we changed the numbering so that as they came.
Just a brief moment. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, members of the jury. I thank you. I appreciate you may wish to talk, but if you can, we have rather strict rules in that regard. Do you need something for your comfort that you wish to address here at sidebar? If not, if you can refrain from speaking, I'll ask you to please do so. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Okay, so go ahead.
We did all this. Well, originally, Your Honor, we had the mark saying like 19th contested.
Right.
What we did when we did the finalists is so let's just mark it all the consecutively and have the contested ones at the end. That's why they have it as tab 19 in the original thing.
So then it's not tab 19, it's a different tab.
Exactly. We'll get you the contested ones so you can see.
All right, so then.
What they're proposing to.
All right, so then, as I understand, what you're seeking to introduce is not behind tab 19.
Correct,
It's not
Your Honor.
in the
It's
exhibit
not,
number one
no.
at all. So then what you're going to need to do is to share it with me. I'll entertain the objection and I'll rule on the objection, okay?
This is file too, I don't know, it's just asking about.
Oh, the in
Okay, so where's the contested?
Well, you have it, I take it.
I have the documents right here, Your
All
Honor.
right, so what is it? You're holding up many documents. Which one
I'm
is
holding
it?
up two, Your Honor.
Which is the document that you're seeking to introduce?
This was the first one. This is the follow-up. So while we're here, we may as well.
Okay. Right, very well.
Can I look over your shoulder?
If you can please explain to me what this document represents.
Your Honor, these are Facebook postings regarding the Confederate flag.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'll hear from you on the objection. Counsel, if it's okay, if you wish to speak, because we're recording, we're picking you up and there'd be some interference. If you wish to speak, you just step back, okay? Okay. So you're seeking to introduce Facebook postings, okay? What's the objection?
Number one, of course, we object to the introduction of the entire topic.
I'm sorry?
We object to the introduction of the entire topic.
Right.
Number two, the Facebook postings aren't relevant. I am not clear in your ruling. As I understand your ruling, they can put in evidence of a Confederate flag in his garage to show racial animus, at least on his part. That's not this.
As to Mr. McCarthy, that's correct.
As to Mr. McCarthy. I object to that, but I understand that.
I understand that.
This doesn't go to that. They're trying to put in, again.
Okay, and if you could just lower your voice a little bit. It's our white noise machine, Ms. Marin, it doesn't go up at all?
I don't think so. I can't find any volume.
Okay, yeah, it's a little softer than most.
It seems like it's louder over here, Your Honor.
So, yeah.
Judge Wolf has classical music.
Well, so yeah, if you could just keep your voice down. Let me look at this, okay?
And actually, we need to, too, because now that this is, yes.
What's that?
And I'm just trying to figure out, I want to look at it too, but I haven't looked at this in a while. That's fine.
I guess one of the concerns that I have is that the documents at issue may constitute hearsay and as a threshold matter, okay? You have given me multiple pages with entries from dozens of individuals, okay? You're not seeking to introduce this as any exception to the hearsay rule, is that correct?
Seeking to introduce it, Your Honor, to show that it created a controversy.
Well, let's focus on the exceptions to the hearsay rule. Mm-hmm. Are you at all maintaining that this proposed exhibit constitutes an exception to the hearsay rule?
It's a contemporaneous record, Your Honor, of the community's reaction to the events.
That's not an exception to the hearsay rule, okay? Is there a hearsay objection?
Yes, that's an objection on every part of short hearsay law.
Right. Because I don't know if it's necessary for me to delve into anything more than simply that. Moreover, there's been no proper authentication. When you're trying to introduce social media, it has to be authenticated and properly authenticated. And I don't even know how you're going to get that through this witness, okay? So the objection is sustained. The document has not been properly authenticated, and on its face, it constitutes hearsay. Okay. What is the next?
Secondarily, Your Honor, there are these articles from the. That's number 20. Those are
right. So these are a series. I'm sorry. Once again, the only reason I ask is that this records, and if you're speaking, it'll pick you up, and then it won't make what we're saying clear. So I do appreciate you could speak, but if you could just step back. Okay. This series of documents, which is proposed to be introduced, constitutes a series of newspaper articles.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there an objection?
Yes.
Okay. What is the basis of the objection?
They're being introduced for a purpose that you have excluded.
Okay, and you're referring to comparator purposes?
Yes,
okay.
The only reason this is being put in is to show that there was a controversy and therefore the city should have done something.
Is there
As I understand
objection based upon hearsay?
Not authentication, hearsay.
Is there an objection based upon hearsay?
Yes.
Okay. Your response to that?
Your Honor, these are reports from the newspaper. They were contemporaneous reports of events that were happening within the community.
They're neither properly nor authenticated and, at least just reading the very first one, contain multiple layers of hearsay. The objection is sustained. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for please understanding that our rules of court provide that if you have anything that you wish to address to me, I'm always happy to hear from you here at Sidebar. Just raise your hand and we'll bring you up. But we don't permit jurors to speak amongst themselves, and I say that with all due respect during the course of trial. Certainly you're free to talk as soon as you leave the courtroom. Thank you very much. Okay, let's proceed.
Mr. Buchanan, do you recall an event that occurred in December 2015 involving Sergeant Dan McCarthy and the community of Greenfield?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recall, sir?
I object. Can I be heard at sidebar?
Sure. Yes.
Of course, it's hearsay, but also, as I understand your ruling, they can use the fact that McCarthy had a fire in his garage to argue that McCarthy may have racial animus because I disagree with him. I understand that you ruling. They're trying to put in the controversy.
The what?
The controversy in town. They're trying to introduce.
I don't know that yet. All there was a question whether or not there was a certain date, something came to his attention. You can renew your objection once the question is more palpably before me. But right now, that is not before me. You can renew your objection.
He can only testify because I know what he sets up. He's going to talk about what he learned from the meeting.
I'm going to wait till the question is before him. Objection's overruled. Please repeat your question.
Did you learn of a controversy involving Sergeant McCarthy within the Greenfield community?
Objection.
Sustain as to the form of the question.
Were you aware of a controversy involving Sergeant McCarthy in the Greenfield community?
Objection.
Same ruling. Please rephrase your question. Objection sustained as to the form of the question.
Was there a controversy that came to your knowledge?
Sidebar. Counsel, your usage of the word controversy is leading. Okay.
Yep.
The objections are sustained.
The complainant in the January 2015 IA against you was whom?
Dan McCarthy.
Are you aware of any reason that he might have a bias against you?
Objection.
Overruled.
Yes.
Okay. And what are you aware of?
I'm aware that Sergeant McCarthy was flying the rebel flag in his garage, open to the public, at a property that he owned. The property was located across the street from one of our elementary schools.
Can you speak up? It's difficult to hear you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The property was located across the street from one of our elementary schools, and the neighbors.
Objection.
Sustained. Please pose your next question.
What kind of flag was being flown?
The Confederate flag.
Did you ever have any discussion with Mr. McCarthy regarding the Confederate flag?
No.
In general, in your many years in the police department, how would you characterize your relationship with Sergeant, now Lieutenant McCarthy?
It was always full of conflict.
Do you have any reaction or thoughts with respect to the Confederate flag?
Objection.
Overruled.
as an African American, if where I see that flag, I know that I'm probably not welcome. It's a really good indicator of where not to go as a black person in America. I consider it a symbol of hate. I consider it a representation of an idea that we should still have slaves. It was the flag of the rebellion South as they were fighting the Civil War over just that fact. So its presentation in this area is it's heartbreaking to see it, and even more damaging to know that it's one of your employees, co-workers rather. That being said, it did lend an aha moment as to possibly why.
It's sustained. That portion is struck. Please pose a question. Thank you.
Your Honor, can I be heard inside?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Your Honor, it's really a logistical issue. I wasn't aware until the last go-round that the contested exhibits weren't in the binder. So the next exhibit I want to go to is contested.
That's fine. So then we're going to have to go. I mean, it doesn't surprise me they're not in there. It's been entered into evidence as an exhibit. I wouldn't expect contested exhibits to be in there.
Mea culpa, Your Honor. We made these binders by communication with people in the audience. We believe that there was a binder contained in contested, so it's on me.
Okay. Well, for the one that's been introduced, I would not expect to have contested exhibits.
But it's our fault that the binder.
Whatever.
I'm just taking blame. I don't want to have him blamed.
As
you know, I'm really good at taking blame.
I cast no blame whatsoever. I respect it. So what simply needs to happen is that every time you're seeking to introduce a document that you need to, I appreciate if you share it with counsel, come sidebar and handle it just as we handle any other contested exhibit, and if it's introduced, it'll be marked as exhibit, in this case, number 2. So that this would be one such document. What is it?
Your Honor, this is the IA with respect to Officer Clark.
Cook. Okay.
Would you explain?
Okay, so we're shifting.
No.
Okay, so we're shifting to Cook now.
Clark.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I haven't heard any testimony as to what the IA was, so maybe before you do anything, you need to lay foundation, and then you're going to seek to introduce it into evidence, demonstrate what?
Pat has some knowledge of the events, and the IA has to do with ongoing, and we're going to revisit what's chief, but ongoing alcohol issues.
Okay, all right, very well. Is there going to be an objection?
I think I've already moved on it. I think this is part of paper 75.
Yeah. This is where I said that it was as a comparative. Right. So, okay. It's not contested.
Okay.
Let's move forward.
Well, it was contested, but you have overruled the objection.
Correct. You can lodge your objection for the record, but meaning that that I understand what you're
Can we
saying.
agree, Ronnie, that if the subject of a motion eliminated, we don't have to review it?
I'll let you do that. I mean, if you want to, generally
I'm
people.
just trying to preserve the record. So we had.
Yeah, we just lodge your objection. I mean, generally I see people lodging an objection regardless of the fact that it's a motion eliminating. You don't have to, but it creates a cleaner record. I don't believe.
Belts and suspenders.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along.
I hand this?
Yes, yeah.
Um, This document refers to whom?
John Todd Clark.
And what is his role?
At the date of this, he would have been a detective.
And this is an internal affairs investigation regarding Detective Clark?
That is correct.
Okay. And you had some impact, or you had some knowledge on this, correct?
I did. I'm just looking at the date to me.
The document is dated December 16, 2016?
Correct.
Okay. And it's prepared by Chief Haig?
It appears so, yes.
He identifies himself at the bottom of page 1 as a witness?
That is correct.
And there's other individuals identified herein?
That's correct. Sergeant Dodge, Sergeant McCarthy.
If we go to page 1 of the narrative, which is page 3 of the document.
Mm-hmm.
The top paragraph discusses what?
That Sergeant McCarthy confronted Todd Clark about possible issues with alcohol.
Okay. Sergeant McCarthy and I, so it's Chief Haig?
Yes.
And the second line says, it's come to my attention, there was a concern that Todd may have come to the fair detail?
Okay, yes.
Okay. While intoxicated?
That's correct.
Okay. When in time, what fair detail is this?
I'm not certain if this is the Wormtown Music Festival or the...
Wormtown is held when?
In September, or the Franklin County Fair, which is also held in September.
Okay. And are they held at the same fairgrounds?
No, they're not.
Okay. Were you at a detail, an outside detail?
At some point, yes.
In that time frame?
Yes.
Where Officer Clark had been?
That's correct.
Okay. And what did you notice when you arrived there?
I had arrived for the Wormtown detail, and it was an 11 o'clock start time. And when I walked into the trailer, there was this overwhelming but very familiar aroma of someone who was intoxicated. It's very familiar to me because I have done a lot of OUI enforcement in my history. And I sort of jokingly made a comment about it saying, did we just arrest someone who was drunk? Because it had that sort of lingering aroma of someone who had been drinking. And I was later informed that...
Objection. Sustained. Please pose another question.
What did you learn?
Objection.
Please rephrase your question. The objection is sustained.
what was your understanding as to the source of the odor of alcohol?
Objection.
Overruled.
Your Honor, it's the same objection.
Why don't you ask a precursor question as to what the source was? Okay. That is to say, to lay a foundation.
Who was it? Where was this that you?
This was in the police trailer. We have basically it's a camper that we use as our home base for remote activities like at the fairground or at Wormtown Music Festival.
And any communication you would have had in the trailer would have been with whom?
The officers that were working that night and or just coming on to shift with me.
And when you show up for a fair detail, how are you dressed?
Depending on your detail responsibilities, you could be in just traffic gear, which is to do the crosswalk, but the main patrol, you're in full uniform.
Full blue uniform.
Yes.
And paid. This was an outside detail.
This is a paid outside detail.
And would you have all of the equipment that a police officer would have in the performance of their normal duties?
Yes. So we would have our baton, our full duty belt, firearm, radio, taser if that's something that you carried. So yes.
In your understanding as to the source of the odor of alcohol that you referenced.
I'm sorry. The objection is sustained as to the form of the question. Please pose a question.
Who was in the trailer?
The only people that I remember in the trailer at that time were Detective Rowell and I think Detective Brooke was a detective then, yeah.
Looking at the documents that are in front of you, do you realize that this is a internal affairs file with respect to Officer Clark?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Do you see any notice of administrative leave?
No, I do not.
Counsel, are you going to seek to introduce this document as an exhibit?
Yes. I would ask to introduce this, Your Honor, as Exhibit 2.
Okay.
Objection.
Okay. For the reasons articulated sidebar, the objection is overruled. The document will be entered into evidence as exhibit number 2. Okay.
And, Your Honor, can I give that to the clerk?
That would be quite helpful. Then you can hand it back to Mr. Buchanan. If you could take the tab that you have on it off, that would be helpful.
Thank you. That's exhibit number 2.
And you can hand it back to the witness if you wish.
I'm going to move on, Your Honor. I will come back to it later. Okay. Was there a second provisional promotion for you?
There was, yes.
When was your second provisional promotion?
I believe it was October of 2000. 2016 or 2017.
And what were the circumstances, sir, that led to a second promotion?
There was an accident involving Sergeant Road, where the driver of the other car was killed. And Sergeant Road was removed from his duties at that point while the accident was investigated. That was my understanding.
You've seen a lot of them. You've seen a lot of the news guys. People demonstrating that's
Senator, can we be heard at sidebar?
Certainly. Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to stand up and stretch if you wish.
Your Honor,
Yes.
this is another contested exhibit, so it didn't show up on the list, and so I'm going to offer it as Exhibit 3, which is the internal affairs.
It's probation. I'm sorry. Is it? You've got, I think, 5 separate documents. Is it just one of them?
There's just one of them.
Okay. Can I see one of the packets, please? The entire packet. Thank you. Okay. And what this is employee pay history totals.
It's really the IA that's behind it.
What is this? Because it's a assemblage of all sorts of different documents. What is it?
So the other than the front page, this is an internal affairs report.
Are you just seeking to introduce not the front page?
I can move later the front page.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the front page is coming off.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the balance of this is on a report for Sergeant Road. Is that what that is?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and is there going to be an objection?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and this was the subject matter of my ruling. Okay, very well, and the document itself comprises letters and regulations. Is this a file, an entire file of the IA investigation?
Your Honor,
as the city
it's
kept
my
it?
understanding it's an entire file of the IA. My brother agreed that we would be able to introduce this.
Okay, very
No,
well.
he
No,
did
he
not.
did.
I
No.
most certainly did not.
Well, that the
Authentication, though.
yeah, yeah, you're correct. But
No,
the
I agree
records
it's
are complete.
authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it depends how much of it you want to put in.
Right.
Number 2, I would like to remove my objection.
Okay.
So if you're clear on Road, they wanted to compare it because they say when Road went onto 111F.
You want to do what?
I'm sorry, the workers' comp version for public safety people is I don't know what chapter they call it 111.
Okay.
41 chapter 1.
41. And it's in general duty.
Right.
They want to be able to argue to the jury that the chief should have removed him from injured and duty status before he was fired. And there's no other evidence. You can. You have to go to court. It's not a comparative. It's not something we can just
Right.
do.
Well, you can. Your objection is noted. The objection is overruled for the reasons articulated in my earlier ruling. You can certainly cross-examine and present evidence in support of your theory, and you may argue that as well. Okay. So the first page is not to be included. And are you seeking to introduce this now so we can say that moment
Yes.
over there? Okay, so then the clip document will be entered into evidence as number 3, okay? And then you may inquire, okay? Thank you.
All right, very well. Ladies and gentlemen, the documented issue has been entered into evidence as exhibit number 3. As with the binder, you'll have all these other additional documents with you during the course of your deliberation.
ROG. You got nothing?
This internal affairs complaint number 17-6-I8 relates to whom, sir?
James Road, Sergeant James Road.
And this relates to a date, well, the date and time is October 1, 2017?
That's correct.
And as a result of, well, this I8 deals with a fatal accident, correct?
That's correct.
As a result of this accident, what happened to Sergeant Rhodes' status with the department?
My understanding was that he was removed from duty pending investigation.
And after Sergeant Rhodes' accident, what happened with your status with the department?
I was approached by the chief to once again take on the position as a provisional sergeant.
And was there, to your knowledge, a civil service list in existence?
At that time, yes.
Okay. And what's your understanding as to what the rules were with respect to the civil service list?
I'm not sure I understand the
Let me
question.
ask you this. Was there a time frame, a clock that was on that civil service list?
My understanding was that the list was good for 2 years. And then if the chief chose, he could petition to have the list extended another year.
Okay. And this was the list generated when?
From the 2015 hiring process.
Where you finished third?
Correct.
To your knowledge, did the chief ever ask that that list be extended?
Not to my knowledge.
And so, if he had asked, it could have been extended to October 2018?
Object.
Sustained as to the form of the question.
What's your understanding as to the approximate date that an extension would run to?
Object.
Overruled.
October of 2018.
How long did you serve as a provisional sergeant after this promotion?
16 months.
Okay. Had you ever done any work where you were a shift commander prior to this?
Yes, I was the OIC, acronym for Officer in Charge, on too many times to mention.
And how do you become officer in charge?
Typically, that's an assignment that is either awarded by the sergeant on the shift that you're working, but for example, in the past, I was the permanent OIC for the days that my sergeant was off. So, and when the sergeant wasn't there, as a senior officer on the shift, I was to take on the responsibilities as the officer in charge. Outside of that permanent OIC designation, when there was a vacancy that could not be filled by having the sergeants work overtime, then the OIC was designated on the schedule, and I worked that position a number of occasions. I couldn't tell you how many.
What do you mean when you said when there wasn't an officer or a sergeant, the OIC did what?
The OIC would take over the responsibilities of the sergeant in running the shift, doing roll call. Basically, you're the sergeant for the shift for just that one shift.
And it was based upon whether a sergeant was available or not.
Correct. The sergeants had sort of first right of refusal to take the overtime. So if a sergeant called out sick or was assigned elsewhere and the shift needed coverage, it would first be bid out to the sergeants. And if none of the sergeants took it, then the OIC was triggered, basically.
Can I see counsel very briefly at sideboard? I'm noting that some of the jurors are reading and looking at the exhibits that are up on the television screen while the witnesses are testifying, and they're not testifying as to what's on the screen, and I'm concerned that they may not be paying
I will talk to Ron about pulling them down.
Let me finish my sentence, please. I'm concerned that they may not be paying attention to what the witnesses are testifying as to. If you can just have your assistant take down the screen when we're not utilizing it, that will avert that problem. Thank you. Okay, you can pose your next question. Thank you.
If we could turn to tab 26, is it? 36.
36?
You sure?
I don't have it. Tab 36.
That's two.
Pardon me? You need 2 minutes?
No. Sorry, I apologize. Do you have two binders, John?
Do I have 2 binders? No.
Okay.
I have 1 binder.
It's in 36 in the second binder.
Okay.
It's in the contested.
I was hopeful there wasn't a second binder, but that's just me. Okay.
This is not even the contested.
Yeah. All right.
But it's still not
I understand.
the numbering
I
issue.
understand.
Okay. Does the council need to be seen at sidebar? Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to. Okay, so we have 2 binders.
First issue is that I take it there are probably some documents in there that are uncontested. Am I correct?
We believe that everything in there is not contested.
Okay, so this
We
is,
believe that
yeah.
there's the, well, I know, as I search about the numbering, what happens, we did
as opposed to having 1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
5
that's
contested.
fine, that's fine.
We consolidate numbers, which
Yeah.
accounts for the numbering issue we have.
That's fine.
Is this a contested exhibit?
No, it's not, I don't believe.
You just don't know where it is.
I don't know where it is.
Okay.
And, Your Honor, we have another set of binders in the car that we can get.
Just to confuse matters further, this is what I wanted to do, because the jurors, I think, are getting a little antsy.
Yeah.
We need to move this forward, and so if you want to locate that document, wherever it may be in one of these two, but I also am going to mark this second binder as exhibit number 4, I believe. Okay, is there any objection to that? Mindful that you will have an opportunity, if there are documents contained therein that are contested, to argue that later. So,
Okay, this is not contested.
that's fine, but my question is there any objection to marking the second binder as exhibit number 4? There's no objection, so that'll be marked as exhibit number 4. I don't know if it's that one or it's another one he's going to show them. This document,
Just to the extent it may not be in the binders, we could mark it as 5.
This.
is it in the binder someplace?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Number 1.
Okay, and what number?
Our numbering system is
Is
not the
different.
same as theirs.
Take a quick look on how many numbers and find out where it is. Okay.
We don't have a
I
copy
can
of
run
it.
it again.
All right, right. You can return to your seats. All right, and if you can please hand up the second binder to First Assistant Clerk Duran, who will mark it as number 4.
Your Honor, I apologize, it's exhibit 20, tab 28.
Okay, tab 28. So,
Binder 1.
okay, very well. All right. Thank you.
Could you identify this document as Mr. Buchanan?
Yes, it's a notice of investigation.
And it was addressed to whom?
Addressed to me, Provisional Sergeant Patrick Buchanan.
Dated when?
October 23rd, 2018.
How did you learn of this?
Other than to say through this letter, I don't recall the exact circumstances under which it was given to me.
And this was a second investigation that was going to be done with respect to you.
That's correct.
Was there an investigation performed?
Yes, there was.
And what was the tenor of that investigation?
It responded to a group of complaints from the officers that I was working with, I was supervising at the time.
And what was the nature? How did the investigation proceed, sir?
Those are two different questions.
Who did the investigation?
It was a Mr. Donovan from an outside agency.
connection with this investigation, did you meet with anyone?
I met with Mr. Donovan.
Okay. And what was your understanding of the charges brought against you with respect to this investigation?
There were several complaints from officers that were working with me. One was for an officer that left the jurisdiction without authority, without overruled. May I continue?
Yes.
Okay. Without authority, and after I had repeatedly asked him to return back to Greenfield, I got very forceful with him in my words and demanded that he return. The other allegations were had to do with an officer Soto.
Right there.
Okay.
If we can turn to tab 28. Can you turn to tab 28?
I'm there.
Okay. Is there a report after about 5 or 6 pages in there from APD management?
There is not.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yeah, sure.
Putting in front of you this document, do you recognize?
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I thought
You went sidebar.
this is the whole. We'll check later, but sure.
I take it this document is being presented for identification, has not yet been introduced into evidence as part of binder number 1 or the second binder. Am I correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you.
That document is a report from whom, sir?
APD management, Alfred P. Donovan, special investigator.
And what's the title of that document?
Investigation report in the matter of Provisional Sergeant Patrick Buchanan.
And there's a date on that report, sir?
December 4th, 2018.
And the report deals with complaints brought by 4 subordinates, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
There's a complaint brought by Officer McDowell.
That's correct.
Okay. Who is Officer McDowell, was he still with the department when you retired?
Well, let's just, are you seeking to introduce this document into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is there an objection?
It's inside exhibit
48.
the second binder.
Okay, at what number?
48.
Okay.
So it's already.
It's already in evidence. Thank you very much. Okay.
Officer Dowell, is he still with the Greenfield Police when he retired?
No.
What was Officer McDowell's shift?
He worked both the 3 to 11 and the overnights.
And when you served as a provisional sergeant, what shift were you working, sir?
Primarily the overnights.
And what would cause you not to work overnights?
Well, there was forgive me, I'm at a loss of words for the term, but effectively I would work 2 overnight shifts, followed by 2 3 to 11 shifts, and that would be my rotation for the week. So there were sometimes, because I was the low man on the bidding totem pole, that was seen as a less desirable shift to work. So I'd end up there. If not, I'm just straight overnights.
Does the report identify a disagreement with Officer McDowell?
I believe that it does, yes.
And what does it say as to McDowell's issues with you?
It was there was a mutual aid, as identified in the report, a mutual aid incident.
And what is mutual aid, sir?
It's when officers from one town go over to another town to assist that town with police functions.
And so what town was being assisted?
In this particular case, it was Montague, but
And what was the issue that you and Officer McDowell had with respect to mutual aid?
before leaving the town as a patrolman, you are supposed to notify the sergeant or OIC. In this particular case, Officer McDowell crossed over into the neighboring town of Gill, not for necessarily police functions. He was going there just to meet up with a fellow officer from the town of Gill Irving, I believe. And the area where they met up, there was a car that was the subject to a previous bolo. Be on the lookout for. There was some concern that the person who operated the motor vehicle might have been having a mental health crisis. So they both see and recognize that, okay, this is the car in the bolo, and they start to investigate. And as I'm listening to the radio traffic, I'm realizing that Officer McDowell is not in Greenfield, which was a surprise to me, and he's not reported directly to me about leaving town. So I start to make my way over there because he calls for backup from another officer. And when I arrive on the scene, I notice that, okay, yeah, that's the car that there's the bolo for, but the doors on the car has been left wide open, and they have taken upon themselves to start investigating, looking for this guy. And says, all right, you can see the urgency here. But there are a couple problems, by going into the car, you might have contaminated a track for a K9 unit. By walking all about, if we're looking for this person who may be having a crisis, let's call a dog in, have the dog track this person. But now, because we've gone up and down the hill, we've contaminated the scene. And all these things are things that you're going to have to explain to someone who's not got 5 or 6 years under their belt. Officer McDowell was a relatively new police officer, and so after we notified this state police and the town of Montague of the location of the car, because this rest area is right near a bridge that folks tend to sometimes jump off of to end their lives. And as it turned out, that's what happened, was that the operator of the motor vehicle did in fact kill himself. And the officer that had come over to assist Officer McDowell from our town, I sent him back to town, and I said, hey, Mike, let's wrap this up and get back to our side of the bridge. And I drove off thinking that was just enough. And later on, he said, I hear him directing traffic on the bridge. And I called him and I said, Mike, what part of return to Greenfield didn't you understand about what I said? And that part is what triggered the complaint, as far as I understand.
If I can turn your attention to page 4.
Page 4?
Yes.
You're at tab 28? Or are you at...
Are we talking about page 4 here, or...
Page.
Of what? Tab
48.
48 or 28?
20?
48, Your Honor.
Okay.
And this is
48 is the APD
correct, Your Honor.
report.
Okay. Page 4.
There's a complaint number 2 listed on page 4 of this document, correct?
Complaint number 2, yes.
Okay. And again, this is Officer McDowell?
That's correct.
Okay. And what happened here, sir?
There is a tendency for officers on our shift, because we're operating at very low numbers, to tend to congregate and hang on to calls. In this particular situation, it was a motor vehicle stop with a passenger and the operator, obviously. And when I drove by the scene, there were 4 cruisers on the scene. And in my estimation as a supervisor, it's like, this is kind of an excessive amount of police activity for these circumstances. Upon pulling up, I realized that at least one of the parties that was there was known to me, was the daughter of a former police captain, or I think it was captain, and I knew her very well. So at that point, I said, I don't care who, but 2 of you guys got to go. There's no need for us to completely saturate this particular call with. You've got one person in cuffs in the back of one of the cruisers, and this female standing in front of the other cruiser. This show of force is just unnecessary. Officer McDowell took objection to that.
Was there any injuries suffered by any police officers in connection with this stuff?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Complaint number 3, it's the Officer Soto locker incident?
Yes.
And what is that?
Officer Soto had a tendency, first of all, in the locker room, Officer Soto's locker is right next to mine. And he had a tendency to show up to work, sort of just spread all his stuff out, leave his locker doors open. And in order for me to go to my locker to do anything, I had to move all his stuff out of the way. So over a period of several months, I confronted Officer Soto about this. I said, Jeff, what do I got to do to get you to close your locker? Dude, it's just a common courtesy. And I thought I was being funny. Legitimately, I said, how about this? The next time you leave your locker open, I'm going to tape it shut. And he said, yeah, you won't have to do that. I said, all right, then just don't leave the locker open. So there were a couple of additional occasions where he, again, just left the locker open. And about the 3rd time, I guess, I taped it shut. No, I didn't guess I taped it shut. I actually taped it shut.
Okay. And how did you tape it shut?
there's two doors, like barn doors that come together. I put a tape across the top seam, the bottom seam, and up the middle.
And where'd you get the tape?
There was another officer in the locker room that I knew had duct tape.
And who was that?
Officer Sumner.
Did Jeff ever speak to you about the tape in his locker?
Yes, we had a conversation about that.
And tell me what happened in that conversation.
He indicated that he didn't think that I had to go that far. I said, we had a conversation about this. I told you that this was what I was going to do in response to you just leaving your stuff out and about. So,
Was the fourth incident is Officer Soto roll call, correct?
yes.
And what was the roll call incident with Officer Soto?
Officer Soto was one of, at the time, one of two Spanish-speaking officers in the department. His closest friend on shift had left to go to work in Holyoke. And he was distancing himself away from the rest of the overnight shift. And in so much that we have 3 rows of desks, he would always sort of isolate himself in the back, even though there were, seats closer up front. And I talked to him about it. It's like, Jeff, I really need for you to make an effort to engage with the shift even minimally. So I'm going to ask that just sit a little bit closer so that the shift feels like you're engaging with them. And again, I said, if you forget to do that, I'm going to ask you to do roll call. Now, as a punishment, it's not really, because we delegate that particular service function all the time. The supervisor or OIC might have some other pending matter at the beginning of roll call. And effectively what it means is that you sit in front of the shift and you go over the previous 16 to 18 hours of the log, pointing out any significant issues. You identify any homes that are on the house checklist. You identify any active warrants that we may need to address. You just basically get the shift ready to go. And that's what I did, and that's what the complaint was about.
And how many people would be in this roll call room? This was for the third shift?
This is for the third shift, so it'd be myself and typically a maximum of 4 other people.
And what did you do with respect to the roll call?
I turned it over to Jeff. All right, come on, you're up.
And did he have any conversation with you afterwards?
No.
Did he move his desk subsequently?
Thereafter, yes. And he also didn't leave his locker open anymore.
Officer Jordan Zukowski. That's at the bottom of the page 4?
Mm-hmm.
Who is Officer Zukowski still with the department?
No, he's not.
Okay. Did Officer Zukowski go through the Mass Criminal or the Mass Police Training Academy?
No, he did not, as far as I know.
And at the time he worked for Greenfield, what was his status?
He was a full-time police officer who had yet to go through the full-time police academy. He had the part-time academy certification, but in order to continue on his career with the Greenfield Police Department, it was necessary for him to go through the full-time police academy.
And how long did Officer Zukowski work with you in your capacity as provisional sergeant?
I believe it was for the entire period, but I'm not sure exactly what his hire date was.
And what kind of incidents did you experience with Officer Zukowski?
Officer Zukowski, from a safety and procedural matter, was very sloppy. And he wasn't very good at taking any corrective advice. Now, in my function as a field training officer, I can teach anyone how to do a motor vehicle stop. And one of the hallmarks of doing a motor vehicle stop is that you should never present yourself in the full frame of the driver's window. You make your approach. There's that vertical part of the car that's referred to as the B pillar. A pillar is the front of the car. That's if you were to look back over your shoulder and you'd see that bar that your window rolls up against, that's the B pillar. Proper training is that you make your approach and you stop behind the B pillar, effectively forcing the driver of the car to have to, if they're going to engage with you, to look back over their shoulder. And that's a safety training piece for anyone who'd been through the police academy. It's basic. But Officer Zukowski was in the habit of walking up to the car very nonchalantly and presenting himself fully in the frame of the car, which presented, a lot of safety concerns on my part. And I would repeatedly call him out on things like that. Although he had been through the field training program, he was still making sort of these juvenile mistakes. For example, after taking someone into custody who was unruly on the street, he placed him in the back of the cruiser without seatbelting them. And the person became unruly. And because he wasn't seatbelted, when Officer Zukowski leaned in to try to address the fact that this guy was, kicking the inside of the car, the gentleman kicked Officer Zukowski in the throat. And I was like, why wasn't he seatbelted in? Yes, sir. That's what you're trained to do. He says, well, he wasn't cooperating with being seatbelted in. And I demonstrated. I went to the kid. I said, listen, you're going to have to be seatbelted in. If there's a problem with that, we'll seatbelt you using a bunch of officers, but I don't really want to go that route, and I don't think that you want to go that route. So he says, all right. And we put the seatbelt on.
What was the Post-it note?
The Post-it note was, I had asked Officer Zukowski to write me a to from.
What is a to from?
It's in police parlance, it's a memo, and the format is sort of in the title. It's to whoever, from whoever, date, whatever the date is, reference, and it's a format that you actually have to learn prior to going to the police academy, and knowing that he was going to be going to the police academy. This was a good opportunity for him to practice that, because you end up writing to froms in the police academy. Almost everyone does. So I asked him to write him a to from as to why he was ignoring the training directives that I was giving him. And upon him finally writing it, I said, here, I want you, I didn't even open it. I said, I want you to take this and I want you to put it up in your locker. And, if we have to cross this bridge again, then but in your locker will be a reminder, this permanent reminder of this conversation and this interaction that we had. And he sort of looked at me kind of quizzically, and I have in my locker a Post-it. Well, I'm sorry. I had in my locker a Post-it from when I first started with the police department. And its significance to me, it represented that the date that I sort of took over that particular locker. And the trouble was that the Post-it was important to me, and that's why I left it there. It was important to me on a personal level. And I showed it to him, trying to get him to understand why I wanted him to put the letter in his locker. But the Post-it, in fact, read, my name, and above it was the name of the officer that I had replaced. And my misjudgment, Officer Zukowski took that as an indication that a threat that I was trying to get him replaced. And so that's what that third Post-it note incident was about.
If we go to page 17 of this document from Mr. Donovan, he indicates that he sustained a violation for the Soto incidents as well as the Post-it note, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Sorry.
And on page 18, he identifies whom he spoke to in the course of this investigation.
Correct.
And he interviewed 10 people, correct?
Yes.
At any time, did you ever issue any discipline to Officer McDowell?
No.
Did you ever issue or recommend discipline for Officer Soto?
No.
Did you ever issue or recommend discipline for Officer Zukowski?
No.
Did you ever issue or recommend discipline for any of the officers who we haven't named who are show up on page 18?
No.
Is it 10:37?
It's contested.
No, it's not. See if we can get it up.
Turning in the first binder, Officer Buchanan, or Mr. Buchanan, to tab 37.
That would be the...
That's in binder number 2, the second binder, which is Exhibit 4.
You gotta subtract out the contested numbers.
Unless you're looking for a different tab number, perhaps.
Can I approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Counsel need not request the court to approach any witness.
I'm sorry, it's tab 29. And this is a letter dated when?
February 25th, 2019.
And it's from the chief to you?
That's correct.
And the chief is sustaining 4 violations, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Violation for conduct unbecoming an officer.
Correct.
Violation for incompetence.
Correct.
Violation for public criticism of the department.
Correct.
in violation of courtesy.
Correct.
Did you have any discussion with the chief about this letter?
I sat down with the chief, as the letter indicates, in early January, and explained my position the way that I just explained it to the jury, and offered to meet with the parties who were affected just to see if we could work this out.
And what's your understanding of the public criticism of the department?
I don't know what that is.
Page 2 of the letter. Oh, withdraw that. Can you identify this document, sir?
Thank you.
This is a letter from Mayor Williams, William Martin, rather, concerning a grievance that I filed for my second demotion.
Okay. And so this letter from the mayor is dated February 28th, 2019?
That's correct.
And you were demoted prior to February 28th, 2019?
That's correct.
And the mayor's decision on page 2 is what?
Is this document already in evidence?
Your Honor, I will have it admitted. I don't know that there's an objection.
It's like the other one. We think it's somewhere in the books, so I do not object to this.
Okay, well, I don't want to lose the thread, so let's see if it's somewhere in here. Otherwise, you'll need to introduce it, and I'll mark it accordingly. So why don't counsel take a brief moment and see whether or not this February 28th letter is included in the tabs.
So far, no luck.
That's why we were preparing a moment.
All right, well, then why don't, and just move to introduce it. If there's no objection, it'll be number 5, and if there are 2 copies in here somewhere, so be it. Okay, so is there any objection to the document being entered into evidence as exhibit number 5?
No, sir.
Number 5, and if you could hand it up to Assistant Clerk Duran, we'll mark it and proceed. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go to 1 o'clock. From where I could sit, I'll tell you there are no clouds in the sky, so it should be beautiful out there for you.
If I could turn your attention to, well, this was a grievance brought by you, correct?
Correct.
And you were well, did it go to a hearing?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I recall, at least.
Okay. Do you recall having a second hearing in front of the mayor?
I remember having met with the mayor about this, with the Lodge 50 representative.
And the mayor's statement, paragraph 2, under fact pattern analysis, could you read that?
1, the employee status was changed to provisional sergeant as no permanent opening existed at the time. 2, as the appointing authority under civil service, a provisional appointment is not permanent and can be removed for any cause. 3, as multiple people left the department, it created a critical need for staffing at the patrol level to respond to the community's needs. 4, therefore, it was in the community's best interest and not a violation to return the employee to permanent patrol officer under civil service, Mass General Law, Chapter 31.
As of February 28, 2019, what was Sergeant Rhodes' status with the town?
I don't know. I'm assuming that he was still.
Sustained.
Yep.
Please pose another question.
Please, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, 37. Yep.
If I could direct your attention to tab 37 of book 1.
There is no tab 37.
There is in book 2.
Okay.
There is in book 2, yes.
So I'm going to approach Your Honor and
If that's indeed the tab you're looking for.
yes.
Thank you.
Who is Stephen Westerling?
Steve Westling is a retired Greenfield police sergeant.
Okay. And when did he retire?
I couldn't say the exact date, sir.
Okay. And this is an IA, an internal affairs complaint dated when?
12/19/2018. 2018, I'm sorry.
Read aloud paragraph 1 at the top of page 4.
Paragraph 1, you said?
Yep.
On On 12/19/2018, the Chief of Police, Robert Haig, asked to speak with the 3 to 11 patrol officers assigned under Sergeant Westerling's command. Chief Haig requested that I find out if the 3 to 11 officers' morale was suffering due to Sergeant Westerling's management practices. Chief Haig told me that he has been told that Sergeant Westerling routinely would not leave his office to assist his subordinates when they were being inundated with calls for service.
Did you work the 3 to 11 shift?
There were some times that I did, yes.
Did Officer Jay Basinski work under you?
Sometimes, yes, he did.
Officer Merrigan work under you?
Sometimes, yes, they did.
Officer Justin Purrington work under you?
Yes.
Officer Corey Green?
Yes, sir.
Officer Jeff Soto?
Yes, sir.
And Officer Cody Gilbert?
Yes, sir.
If you read aloud paragraph 2, starting with the second sentence therein.
Officer Butinsky did say that some of the shift complained that Sergeant Westerling would not stop giving out road details or scrutinizing reports to assist his officers when they were getting slammed with calls for service. Officer Butinsky said that something changed about a month ago, and Sergeant Westerling has started helping out a lot more, and he felt that the problem has taken care of itself.
Okay. The IA that we just looked at with respect to you was dated when? By Mr. Donovan.
December 4th, 2018.
But the investigation's on page 18?
Yeah, on page 18 it indicates 12/4/2008.
The interview on page 18?
Yes, 10/25 through 10/31.
Okay. So October 25 through October 31, Mr. Donovan was in and around the Greenfield Police Department interviewing.
Correct. There's also an indication that on the 5th he spoke with Lieutenant Gordon also.
If we go to the next paragraph on tab, with respect to Sergeant Westerling.
Okay.
37, tab 37.
What page?
It's on page 3, or 4, excuse me. It's the first page of the narrative.
The one that's labeled page 1.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's different.
With respect to Sergeant Merrigan, can you read the sentence, the second sentence, and the third sentence therein?
With respect to Sergeant Westerling, you mean?
Yeah, what Sergeant or Officer Merrigan said.
On 12/19/2018, I met with Officer Merrigan regarding Sergeant Westerling's management practices. Officer Merrigan said that at one point he did have a problem with Sergeant Westerling not seeming to help out with calls for service, but the problem has self-corrected. Officer Merrigan said that he did not have any problems with the way Sergeant Westerling ran his shift at this time.
If we go down to Corey Green.
On 12/20/2018, I met with...
Wait for a question.
Okay.
Read the second sentence therein.
Officer Green said that Sergeant Westerling seemed to spend a majority of his time reviewing reports, doing details, and working on CIT stuff. And Sergeant Westerling would not even leave the station some days. At all.
In the line above it, the Officer Green said in the past.
Officer Green said in the past, said that Sergeant Westerling seemed... Officer Green said that in the past there have been issues where he felt that Sergeant Westerling would not help out the shift when they were getting a lot of calls for service.
Could you turn to Officer Gilbert? The second sentence with respect to his comments.
Officer
Page 2, excuse me. Yes.
Yes, Officer Gilbo said that Sergeant Westling would not help out the shift at all, and he seemed to always be doing paperwork. I asked Officer Gilbo if Sergeant Westling would assist with critical calls. Officer Gilbo said he felt Sergeant Westling would not help with critical calls or routine calls for service for the most part. Officer Gilbo then said that he did not hear his radio when he was in his office. I'm sorry. Officer Gilbo said that Sergeant Westling would not come out of if he heard the call on the radio, but that he felt many times Officer Westling did not hear his radio when he was in the office. Shall I continue?
Were you... To your knowledge, was Sergeant Westerling in any way disciplined or found responsible under this IA complaint?
No, not to my knowledge.
Nope, but it is. This one?
Your Honor, with 4 minutes left to go,
Sure. Do you want to suspend?
please.
Okay, very well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to suspend for the day. It's just about 1 o'clock with the ongoing instruction not to discuss the case with anyone, including amongst yourselves, friends, family members, anyone, in any manner, nor to do any investigation or research or to read any media reports to the extent that there are any. I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Hope you get some sunshine and have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.